Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And we have got to part 3 in our story tonight. So we're about to find out who this mystery woman is. She doesn't even know herself. She has no idea even what her name is. She just found herself waking up on a beach after having almost drowned in the ocean. So we're about to uncover that little mystery. So let's continue with our story. I nod uncomfortably as I sit back on the hospital bed, studying the detectives through narrowing eyes. I can't even remember who I am, I say suddenly, feeling so desperately sorry for myself. The tears trickle unabashedly down my cheeks. You mustn't worry about that, and don't go upsetting yourself, said the policewoman kindly. You have retrograde amnesia, I'm told, from Dr. Valensky. You've been exposed to a very stressful situation, which can shatter your memory. He believes it'll come back to you when your body has overcome the shock it's endured. How are you feeling? She asked me. I'm feeling a lot better. My throat is dry and scratchy. My mind is clearer and sharper. Certainly after the IV fluids, I'm thinking a lot clearer. But my head still hurts a great deal. I'm sorry to hear that. I do understand you had a nasty thump to the head. Do you mind if I take a look? Of course I don't mind, I say, showing her the area on my head that was swollen. It's this part over here. The detective examines my bump, running her fingers down my scalp, and she whistles. That is nasty. I'm not going to lie to you. It's one hell of a bump. Do you think someone tried to hurt you? She asked me. Do you remember being hit on the head at all? I clutch my scalp, rubbing my fingers over it. It does hurt, I admit. It's tender to the touch. I look at the detective through blank eyes that convey to her disappointed face that I sadly have no recollection of the event. If indeed someone did whack me over the head, I hope that we're barking up the wrong tree here, but I have a distinctive feeling that we're not, and that someone really did set out to hurt me, and possibly even kill me. I shrug my shoulders nonchalantly and take a sip of my bottled water to relieve my dry throat. It's all right, said the officer obsequiously. Do you remember anything at all? The doctor believes you were in the water for a short while, and that is very concerning as far as I'm concerned. It's true. That's the part of the nightmare that I'd like to forget, and it's the only part that I actually seem to remember very vividly. I do recollect finding myself drowning in the ocean and wondering what on earth I was doing there. It was so surreal. It would have seemed like a dream if the water had not been so dreadfully cold. You poor thing, said the policewoman sympathetically, holding her male colleague's gaze. It sounds like you were hit on the head. You came round from the shock when your body hit the ice-cold water of the ocean. I can't imagine how frightening that must have been for you. Dr. Valensky is amazed that you didn't suffer from hypothermia or end up with a nasty chest infection. He tells me your lungs are completely clear. That is very good news. You had a lucky escape, you did. It was obviously not meant to be your time, because believe me, it's a miracle you survived. I've known others that have not been so lucky in icy water like that. Perhaps you can tell me and my colleague here what you actually do remember about being in the water. I know it's awful to have to go over all that again, but it might trigger a memory of sorts. I was hesitant to do so, as my experience of drowning in the ocean was not something I wished to recall, and always seemed to bring me out in nervous hives. I told the officers all I knew, omitting of course the outlandish part of being rescued by a big black humanoid creature with yellow eyes and a human face. I figured out that they would take such an account with a great measure of scepticism, more so than Dr. Valensky himself. Ostensibly I knew that the police dealt with hard, cold facts. If I started rambling on and on about a yellow brick road and Alice in Wonderland-like fictitious creatures that had rescued me from the icy water, it wouldn't have gone down desperately well. In the circumstances, they would undoubtedly have thought that I had sustained even more than a nasty blow to the head. And I wouldn't blame them for concluding that. But I knew that the thing that rescued me from the ocean was real. "Do you know how you came to be washed up on the beach?" the officer asked me. "I must have swum to shore," I lied. "That's the only thing I can conclude." The policewoman looked at me intently. "Do you really not know who you are?" she asked me, as if she wanted to establish that a human being really was capable of waking up and not knowing who they are. "I really don't," I admitted bashfully. "I can't even remember what I look like. The face that I saw staring at me in the mirror gave me a shock this morning. I didn't recognize myself. That really freaked me out." "That is brutal," said the male officer. "Really brutal. I can't imagine what that must have been like for you, young lady." And the sympathy he extended towards me made me blurry with even more tears. I really was feeling very sorry for myself. "It's hard," I admitted. "Really hard. And very scary. I'm scared someone out there really wants me dead. And I don't even know who they are. Why can't I remember anything?" The female officer put an encouraging hand on me. She tapped my shoulder gently. "Don't beat yourself up about all this. I'm sure your memory will come back. But if someone did try to hurt you, we'll find them soon enough. In my experience, cockroaches have a nasty habit of reappearing from underneath the woodwork." "But what about the fact that I don't know who I am? How do I even go home when I don't even know where home is?" The police officer gives me an encouraging smile. "It's not a train smash," she assures me. "This is a small town. I'm sure someone is going to notice you're missing and contact us. We'll have to, of course, verify they are who they say they are. Failing that, we can go to the media, television, radio. But I'm sure it won't come to that," she said encouragingly. "The day is still young, but we'll get back to you as soon as we have more details. My only concern at this point in time is for your safety. As I keep saying, we'll need to investigate if someone did intend to harm you. What happened to you might have been accidental, but it could, of course, be nefarious. So the doctor has given us permission to allocate a police guard outside the ward to keep a close and vigilant watch over you for your own safety. Because if someone did try to harm you, and they discover you're in hospital still alive, they might want to harm you again, and before you remember them and report them to the police." "So you do think someone deliberately tried to harm me?" I asked the officers, unable to disguise the fear in my eyes. "It's a precautionary measure we're taking," said the male officer. "It's a possibility. We don't want to take any chances. You could, of course, have taken a fall on some rocks, tumbled, slipped into the ocean. It happens. The trouble is that with your not remembering what happened, we need to make sure you're absolutely safe." When the officers had left, a young armed man wearing a police uniform stood outside my ward. He was an ever reminder to me that my life might indeed be in danger, that someone out there wished to harm me. It was a day later that the officers returned, and I could see by the pleased expressions on their faces that they'd hit pay dirt and knew exactly who I was, and I was a little apprehensive of what they were about to reveal to me. "I'm guessing you know exactly why we've come to see you," she said with a broad grin on her face that lit up her chocolate brown eyes. Both officers pulled up chairs as they sat next to my bed. "How is the patient feeling today?" she asked me. "Do you have any memory returning?" "I guess it's a little bit too soon for that." "No, I'm afraid I don't," I say. "I'm hoping you're both going to tell me who I am." "Your name is Isla Holmes." "Isla," I say. "But that's not Italian, is it? You thought you were Italian?" "Well, you know, I've got dark hair, haven't I? Dark eyes, I thought." "You're definitely not Italian," affirmed the male officer, unable to suppress a smile that was creeping across his face. The revelation made me feel a tad disappointed, I have to say. It might have made me feel more exotic to have Italian ancestry. "Your father's side of the family, I believe, is from Fairbanks, Alaska. Your mother's side of the family is from California. Your grandmother lives in this seaside town. It was your grandmother who reported you missing and contacted the police." "Why not my parents? Why didn't they do that?" I asked incredulously. "Where are they?" "You don't live with your parents. You live with your grandmother. A lovely woman she is too. We both met her. She'd been away for the weekend to Fairbanks in Alaska to visit her sister for her birthday. When she returned, she was very concerned as to your whereabouts. She couldn't find you anywhere and sensed that something was terribly wrong. She phoned everybody she could think of to establish where you could be. It would seem no one knew where you were, which was why she reported you missing to the police. We are satisfied that she is indeed your genuine grandmother. She is here now waiting in the restaurant downstairs having coffee. Very excited to see you, she is." "It's true," said the female officer, interjecting. "She was so worried about you. A very nice old lady. We wanted to get your permission first before we sent her up. Do you think you can handle any visitors? I know she's dying to see you. I can stay with you if you like, if it's all too much for you. Or your grandmother can come back another day if you prefer, when you're feeling stronger perhaps. She's worried about you and startled to hear about your amnesia. She cannot get her head around the fact that you don't know who you are, but she's eager to fill in the blanks for you, resolve some of your mysteries, so to speak. The good news is we questioned her. She is certain you have absolutely no enemies. She thinks you were attacked. It was likely a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or that you could have had a nasty fall or something." "Well, that is a relief," I said. "It goes without saying that we're still viewing what happened to you with a measure of suspicion until your memory comes back to you. We'll likely still be drawing blanks, but we shall be questioning your friends and family, as a precautionary measure, of course. Do you think you're up to seeing your grandmother? She can fill in all the blanks for you, resolve some of the mystery, as my colleague says. So speaking to her will be a relief for you. You'll be able to establish who you are." "It is a relief, I agree. I think I am ready. I am up to seeing her. Ready as I'll ever be. So I guess you can send her up." The female officer gave me her card. "Ring me if you remember anything or need anything. Remember, I'm only a phone call away." "Thanks so much," I said. "I appreciate everything you've both done."
"It's our job," said the male detective. "I hope, Isla, that your memory does come back to you. And as my colleague was saying, if you remember anything significant, don't hesitate to get in touch. We wish you the best and a speedy recovery."
I wait rather apprehensively in my hospital bed, propped up against fluffy pillows, nervously anticipating my visitor. All I know is that my name is Isla Holmes. Believe it or not, from what the officer told me, I'm not of Italian heritage, which has thrown me off my pedestal a little. Apparently I've been living with my grandmother for the last 3 months, but the detective, or officer, was evasive when I asked after my parents. She looked at me with sorrowful eyes, as if holding something back. I wonder if my parents are actually dead. Maybe they were killed in a car accident or something, a long time ago. Why have I only been living with my grandmother, though, for the last 3 months? Maybe they died more recently. That must be it. I don't even have an apartment or a job, because I obviously still live with my grandmother. The detective mentioned college friends, so I guess I must be a student. I don't even know how old I actually am. I have so many questions. I'm hoping my grandmother can shed some light on everything for me. At least the police are treating my case with a measure of suspicion, although they're open to the fact that I accidentally might have smashed my head on a rock after a fortuitous fall and got caught up in an ocean current and swept away to sea. Or a perfect stranger who didn't know me from a bar of soap vindictively whacked me on the back of the head. But they believe that scenario is very unlikely and rarely ever happens, as most crimes are driven by motive. I may know nothing about my past. I may not know who I am or where I'm from, but what I do know is something is not adding up about me being caught up in the ocean. But without knowing who I am, I'm grasping at straws. I try to comprehend what actually happened to me. Before long, a nurse is beckoning an old woman into my hospital ward.
The guard on the outside, whom had been informed by the officers that she was paying me a visit, grants her access to the ward. I'm so disappointed because I do not recognize her, as she moves steadily towards me, her blue eyes clouded with concern. She places a bottle of old-fashioned cinnamon cola on the countertop by my bed, and a paper bag containing big fat juicy green grapes, along with another paper bag containing a large ice apple fritter. She tells me that those are my favourite doughnuts. She pulls a chair beside my bed, grabbing my hand in hers. My grandmother tentatively looks at me, and for a brief second we're both bathed in a rather uneasy silence. "I've been so worried, my dear. How are you feeling? Do you recognize me at all?" I retract my hand away from her, because this woman is a stranger to me. She may be my grandmother by blood, but I do not know her at all. I don't recognize her. "Are you really my grandmother?" I ask her, peering at her like I might look at a dissected tadpole under a slide of a microscope in a science laboratory. The woman frowns, so that the crepey lines around her face are greatly accentuated. "So it's true, then? You really have lost your memory? Oh, how dreadful, you poor, poor thing! When the lovely police officer or detective told me that you had retrograde amnesia, I think it's called, it was hard for me to grasp, because I couldn't imagine you losing your memory like this. I've always been so very close to you, my dear. Do I not even look familiar to you at all?" she asked me with a hopeful glint in her eyes. "Sorry," I say, shaking my head vigorously, tears spilling down my cheeks, as I'm infuriated not to remember a damn thing, but there is nothing that I can do about it. "It's not your fault, my dear. Please don't blame yourself. I'm just so heartily relieved that you're alive and well, on your way to making a full recovery. After all, isn't that what really matters? But you do look so pale and washed out, my dear. You must have been so terribly frightened." I study my grandmother. She has a shock of white curly hair, framing her small pixie face. She has a flawless peachy complexion that is in excellent condition, but she's got a feathering of expressive lines around her blue eyes that announce her age very cheerily, but the lines make her rather interesting. She is petite but walks with a bit of a stoop, but I'm struck with the realization that I don't look at all like her. My grandmother reaches out to me, squeezing my hand. "Please don't be upset, my dear. From what that lovely police lady told me, you've had a nasty, nasty shock. She says in time your memory will come back. But it's the trauma that made it go away. It's keeping your memories at bay for the time being as a kind of protective mechanism. That's what she thinks, anyway." My grandmother looks at me closely. "What were you doing on the beach, my dear? The police believe you were in that icy cold water in the ocean. You took a knock to the head, I believe. They're suggesting that someone might have intended to harm you. What a dreadful thought! I can't bear to even consider it." "That's what I'm worried about," I say, sitting up. "I can't remember anything. Do I have any enemies you know about?" My grandmother looks taken aback by my comments. "Enemies? Well, I don't think you've got any enemies, my dear. I told the lovely policewoman that, you know. Not that I know of course. You're liked by so many people. But then you're not on speaking terms with your parents, which is why you're living with me. You're only 18, you know, still at college." "My parents aren't dead," I say, sitting up with a start. "So they're not killed. They weren't killed in a car accident then?" "Absolutely not, my dear. Where on earth did you get that strange idea from?" said my grandmother, looking rather befuddled. "Your parents are still very much alive and well. They live in this coastal town, you know, not very far from me." "If that's true, then, why aren't they visiting me at the hospital? Why am I living with you? It doesn't make any sense." My grandmother's face breaks out in a series of worried lines across her forehead. "Well, I don't know how to say this, dear, but you and your parents are not on speaking terms at the moment. It grieves my heart, it does. But your mother, she can be so obstinately stubborn. I informed them both about your very unfortunate accident. But your mother—" My grandmother seems to be unable to articulate the words. She shakes her head sorrowfully and says, "Never you mind about all that, my dear. Let's focus on the here and now, shall we? After all, that's all that matters. Dr. Walensky says you can come home when you feel ready and stronger. So let's not worry about things that we can't change, but concentrate on your getting better, my dear. I'm sure in time your memory will come back. Everything will make perfect sense to you then. For the time being, we should take things slowly but surely. I should not want to overwhelm you with too much information. Nor should you have too many visitors. Dr. Walensky says that could be overwhelming for you. I have even told your friends to stay away from you for the time being. Everybody is eager to see you. They all send their love. But everyone is relieved you're on the mend. And that's all that matters, is it not?" I grab my grandmother's arm so hard, she almost winces in pain. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that," I say apologetically. "But you need to tell me. Why am I not speaking to my parents? You don't think they tried to drown me in the ocean, do you?" My imagination is rocketing through my head with insane, preposterous ideas. If my parents are not speaking to me, would they want to harm me? Are they the reason I found myself drowning in the ocean? It was always a possibility, was it not? "Sweetheart," said my grandmother, taking my hand in hers and squeezing it sharply. "Now you listen to me. Despite everything, your parents love you very, very much. You've just had a bit of a fallout with your mother, that's all. Your mother is a bit of a drama queen. Overreacts about everything, she does. Your father wanted to come to the hospital very much to see you. He was dying to see you. Very concerned about your welfare, he was. Horrified to think that you could have drowned, and that he could have lost his beloved little girl. Your mother would not allow him to visit you, which is typical of her. She rules the household with an iron rod, I'm afraid. It's her way or the highway, always has been. In the end, your father always does what your mother wants him to do. Your mother can be as hard as nails and as cold as a dead fish," she said, shaking her head sorrowfully. "My son used to stand up for himself in the good old days before he married your mother. But my goodness, how times have changed. Your mother says it's karma what happened to you, and that the good Lord is punishing you for your sins so that you will be brought to repentance. Your mother's very angry with you, my dear. She threw you out of the family household, which is why you live with me. She's not best pleased with me for taking you in. She thinks no one should help you in the circumstances." At this startling revelation from my grandmother, I contort my face into a road map of puzzle lines across my forehead. I stare at my grandmother with a bewildered look on my face. What could I have done that was so terrible that my own mother wanted to regurgitate me like a bad meal that she'd eaten at the greasy spoon? Circumstances, I say. What circumstances? My grandmother shifts uncomfortably in her chair. For a moment she avoids my steely, inquiring gaze. Your mother is a very religious lady, my dear. She takes the 10 Commandments very seriously. I've always tried to point out to her that she's far too self-righteous for her own good, like the Pharisees in the Bible. But she doesn't see herself like that. It's amazing how she sees herself. I think she considers herself to be a virtuous, godly woman. Let's just say she sees the splinter in everybody else's eye all too clearly, and fails to see the huge log in her own eye. When she discovered what you'd done, she threw you out of the house without even batting an eyelash. She was so incensed with you. She even tossed your clothes out of the window, making a spectacle and a complete exhibition of the whole affair in front of the neighbours. One of the neighbours described it as watching a scene out of Days of Our Lives. Why, the only other week when I was grocery shopping in the supermarket, with you at my side, your mother was there in the supermarket doing a weekly grocery shop. I went up to her and said, "Hello, Margaret, how you doing?" And you know what she said to me. No, I say bemused. What did she say to you? She looked at me as if I was a perfect stranger. And she said to me, "Do I know you? I think not." And with that she swaggered away with her trolley, turning around and said, "What does darkness have in common with light? Nothing as far as I'm concerned. You are the dark, I am the light. So sorry, I do not know you." You were most upset about that, and went running after your mother, begging her not to be so unreasonable towards you. Your mother spat on your shoes and said, "I've got nothing to say to you. As far as I'm concerned, you are not my daughter anymore. I will never forgive you for what you did." But I don't understand. What could I have done that was so dreadful, I ask? Once again my grandmother looks extremely uncomfortable. She lowers her voice to a whisper. "You've been having an affair with a married man, my dear." "I have," I said, looking at my grandmother with rounded eyes. "What is his name?" "His name is Drew Sangueston." "Where did I meet him?" I ask. "You were babysitting the Sanguestons' 2 children, 8-year-old Patty and 6-year-old Arla." "You are joking," I say aghast. "I had an affair with the kid's father. How could I do that? That's awful." My grandmother frowned. "That's exactly what your mother said, my dear. She was very angry with you. She said marriage is sacred, that you have deliberately destroyed and defiled what God has brought together, and that she could not have someone living under her roof who dishonored the good Lord." "Does this Mrs. Sanguestine know that I've been having an affair with her husband? Maybe she's the one that wanted me dead. Surely I've made an enemy out of her. I mean, if she knew I was cheating with her spouse, then maybe she felt threatened by me, worried about her marriage collapsing. You know what they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She must feel so betrayed by her husband. And by me, of course. As far as I know, she never had any knowledge of the affair. But I'm afraid Mrs. Sangueston is dead. So your theory about her being behind why you found yourself drowning in the ocean carries no weight." "She's dead?" I gasp. "That's dreadful. Those poor kids losing their mother like that. When did this happen?" "About a week ago, my dear. She was found at home, as dead as a dodo. The coroner said she died of a fatal stroke." That's dreadful, I say again. Do they know what caused it? Your mother is blaming you, my dear, for what happened to Mrs. Sanguistin, which is most unfortunate because it is not your fault. She phoned you to tell you in no uncertain terms that she never wanted to speak to you ever again, and that even if Mrs. Sanguistin did not know about your tortured affair with her husband, that indirectly you were responsible for her death. She claims that a wronged woman always knows when she's been cheated on, and that this revelation, even if it was unconscious, was eating Mrs. Sanguistin up on the inside, facilitating her death. I must be such a bad person, I say. The way I feel about myself now, I don't believe I'd willingly set out to hurt anyone like this. As for hurting those poor children by cheating with their mother's husband, I just don't know what to say. I'm confounded. I can't believe I behaved so inappropriately. Those poor kids. My grandmother nudged me gently on the shoulders, wiping one of my stray tears away with a tissue that she dragged out of her purse that smelt of talcum powder and lavender. Now you listen to me, my young lady. You're an 18-year-old girl, for goodness sake. That man, Mr. Sanguistin, seduced you. It was not the other way round. He's the one who should be ashamed of his behaviour. He is old enough to be your father. He is? I asked, looking staggered. You're joking, right? Why would I go out with someone as old as my dad? Well, he knew what he was doing, my grandmother said, sounding angry. He pursued you with flowers and chocolates and romantic poetry. I do not like the man, especially when he claimed he'd written a poem that was written by a famous poet. He's as slippery as an eel, and I told you as much while you were dating him. I knew you were feeling chuffed because an old man was showing so much interest in you, but that in time I hoped you would see the error of your ways. You know the saying, if they'll do it with you, they'll likely do it to you. You were so in love with the man, so flattered by all his advances. You are young and naive, my dear. I think it was exciting for you to have an older gentleman showing so much interest in you. It made you feel all grown up. You said he was so much more mature than the other boys that showed you interest and gave you compliments. Your mother begged you to end the affair, but you insisted you were very much in love with Mr. Sanguistin, and that would never happen. You kept going on about how he was going to divorce his wife. You would adopt his children. Your mother was incensed with you. She called you some foul names that I don't care to repeat. My grandmother seemed to shudder at the mere memory of the names my mother had used on me. She shook her head sorrowfully. Your mother can be so unreasonable, as I keep saying. She failed to appreciate how manipulative your boyfriend is. She thinks you were making a play for the man, but it was the other way round. I told him to leave you alone. He called me a silly old bat who should mind my own business. So there we are. That is the end of part 3. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.